Starts at 6:30. Don't be late. Under it was a photo. My parents at either end of a long Christmas table, my younger brother in the middle, cousins and partners filling every seat. Matching napkins, candles, wine glasses lifted in a toast. Every seat taken. No empty place setting. No extra chair. No sign I'd ever been part of that table at all. The doors slid shut, cutting off the lobby noise. I stared at the photo as the elevator dropped toward the parking garage in downtown Minneapolis. The caption was from my father, Douglas Hale, "First Christmas with everyone home again." Everyone. There was no separate text to me, no private explanation, no "wish you were here." Just a performance of wholeness with my absence edited out. By the time I reached my car, another notification appeared. This one wasn't from the group chat. It was an email forwarded from my father with a single line of text above it. Subject: auto loan. Amount due: $30,000. Handle this before the end of the month. Attached was a statement from a bank in Oregon. 3 missed payments on a metallic blue SUV registered to my parents' address outside Portland. Primary borrower: my younger brother, Gavin Hale. Co-borrower: Douglas. No greeting, no context, no question mark. Just a demand, written like a command. My name didn't appear anywhere on the loan documents, but the bill landed in my inbox like it belonged to me. I drove home in silence through early evening snow. Minneapolis in December felt honest that way. Gray, flat, unforgiving. Inside my apartment overlooking the frozen river, the usual quiet greeted me. Neatly stacked files, a small couch, clean dishes, everything exactly where I'd left it. I dropped my keys in the tray by the door, set my phone on the counter and watched the screen light up again. A text from Gavin. "Just handle the payment, okay? Dad's freaking out and Mom's stressed enough. Don't make it into a big thing. It's not like you can't afford it." There it was. Not like you can't afford it. To them, that was the beginning and end of every calculation. They didn't ask whether they should involve me, whether I wanted to help, whether excluding me from Christmas might change the equation. They just saw a problem and pointed it at the person most likely to absorb impact. I opened their group photo again. My parents and my brother wrapped in warm light, plates full, glasses raised. The caption said, "Everyone." The email said, "Handle this." The sum of those 2 messages was simple. We don't need you, but we need your money. My thumb hovered over the screen, but no reply formed. I didn't argue or ask why I hadn't been invited. I knew the answer already. Awkward. Tension. Don't want drama. All the usual excuses. I set the phone down, opened my laptop, and logged into the systems that had made them think I could casually pay off a $30,000 mistake. My job title was Incident Response Analyst, which meant I spent my days picking apart digital disasters for banks and insurance companies. I was trained to move through crises in 4 steps: assess, contain, remediate, prevent. Cold, clean processes that didn't care how anyone felt about them. My family had never understood what I did. To them, it was computer stuff that somehow produced a good salary and let them assume I could fix anything that broke, whether or not I'd touched it. I opened the email attachment and skimmed the loan details. Gavin had bought the SUV less than 2 years ago. The payment amount was more than I'd pay for rent if I still lived in Portland. The missed months were recent. The bank had already sent 2 warnings. The next step would be repossession and then sale of the delinquent note to a debt buyer. I recognized the bank's name. My firm had investigated a breach for them the previous year. I knew who they worked with when they offloaded bad loans. I requested a copy of the original agreement using the reference numbers in the statement. While I waited, my phone buzzed again. A text from my father. "I assume you got the statement. This is time sensitive. You know your brother's situation. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Your brother's situation." That was his polite phrase for the golden story wrapped around Gavin since we were teenagers. Star athlete, freak injury. So much potential lost. My parents had turned that into a permanent justification for treating him like a fragile prince who shouldn't have to live under normal rules. He drank too much in college? Stress. He changed majors 5 times and dropped out twice? Depression. He blew money on things he couldn't afford? Coping. The point wasn't whether he hurt. The point was that they never let the pain grow up. They kept it in amber because it gave them a reason to protect him from consequences, as long as someone else paid. The email from the bank came through. I opened the PDF. Primary borrower, Gavin. Co-borrower, Douglas. That was it. No guarantor, no co-signer, no hidden trap with my name on it. Legally, I had nothing to do with this debt. Informally, my parents clearly believed my account existed as an invisible third line on every contract they signed. I opened a note and typed 3 short sentences. I am not on this loan. I did not sign this contract. I will not pay this balance. I kept the words simple on purpose. I'd spent a lifetime wrapping their feelings in padding. Facts didn't need padding. I called the bank's customer service number. When the representative answered, I identified myself, gave the loan number, and asked a few pointed questions to confirm what I already knew. I was not a borrower. They had no legal claim to my money, and if the account went to collections, it would eventually land in the hands of firms I already had professional contact with. I hung up, opened a secure messaging app, and typed a brief note to a woman named Carly who worked at one of those firms. We'd collaborated before on fraud cases. I told her I was interested in acquiring a specific auto loan if her company ever bought it. I gave her the loan number and the bank's name. I didn't explain why. In that world, motives were rarely pure and rarely questioned. She replied quickly. If it came across her desk and the numbers made sense, she'd make sure my small Minnesota LLC got a shot at it. I already had that entity set up for side consulting work. Clean paperwork, separate from my employer, designed to hold things of value. I had never imagined one of those things might be my brother's mistakes. Before I could talk myself out of it, I opened a new email to my father, CCing my mother and Gavin. Subject, auto loan. I wrote, I will not be covering Gavin's car payments or any part of his outstanding balance. I am not a borrower on this loan and did not consent to be responsible for it. Going forward, do not send me bills for debts I did not incur. I read it once, deleted a softer sentence trying to creep in, and hit send. The message left my outbox with a quiet whoosh that sounded louder than any argument I could have started in the group chat. For the rest of the night, I ignored the steady vibration of my phone while I worked on an actual incident for a paying client. Around midnight, I turned the phone face down and went to bed. In the morning, it showed missed calls from my father, frantic texts from Gavin, and a single short message from my mother. Are you sure about this? I replied to her with 3 words. Yes, I'm sure. It was the first time in years I had said no to them without padding, apology, or compromise. The loan sold faster than I expected. 3 days after Christmas, in the middle of a routine meeting, Carly sent me a 1-line message. It's yours if you still want it. She attached the purchase offer. The bank had packaged Gavin's delinquent note with a batch of other troubled auto loans and sold them at a discount. If my LLC wanted that specific account, we could acquire it for less than half the remaining balance. I read the number twice. I could have paid the entire $30,000 directly to the bank for my family and spared them any public embarrassment. Instead, for significantly less than that, I could legally become the party they'd have to answer to. It wasn't the responsible, clean choice my therapist would have recommended. It was something darker. Consequence sharpened into intention. I forwarded the signed documents from my LLC. Within hours, the bank transferred the note. By that afternoon, my company was the official holder of my father and brother's debt. There was nothing illegal about it. People bought and sold debt portfolios every day. The only unusual part was that this time, the person on the other side wasn't a faceless corporation. It was the quiet daughter they'd trained themselves not to see. The repossession order went out based on the bank's original timelines. I didn't fast-track it. I didn't stop it either. The next morning, my mother's text came with a photo attached, a tow truck in their Portland driveway. The blue SUV half-loaded onto the flatbed, front wheels lifted, back wheels still on the concrete. A worker in a vest tightened straps while Gavin stood on the porch steps in shorts and a t-shirt, his bare legs red in the winter air, yelling at someone off camera. My father was in the background, phone pressed to his ear, fury etched into every line of his posture. A neighbor's house loomed across the street, blinds tilted just enough for someone to watch. Under the image, my mother had typed, "They're taking the car. Your father is furious. Gavin says this is your doing. Please, can you fix it?" I stared at the picture for a full minute, taking in the license plate, the familiar outline of my parents' house, the slight blur of movement as the truck pulled the car further up. This was the kind of scene they'd always sworn they were immune to. That happened to other people. Irresponsible people. People who didn't work as hard as they did. Now the street they'd lived on for 20 years was watching the illusion crack. Instead of answering her, I put my phone down and returned to my work screen. At lunch, curiosity got the better of me. I searched the street name with tow truck and SUV. A video popped up inside a local neighborhood group. Someone had filmed the entire thing from across the street, narrating softly. In the shaky phone footage, I heard my father say, "My daughter is taking care of this. This is a mistake." And the driver responded that he had a repossession order and no such note in his system. "If you want to dispute it, talk to your lender," the man said. It felt like a script from my world dropped onto theirs. The process I usually watched from behind a monitor had stepped into their driveway. I expected guilt to surge in. Instead, what I felt was a harsh kind of alignment. For once, the weight of their choices rested where it belonged. That didn't make it pretty. It did make it honest. My phone kept buzzing all afternoon. At one point, I stepped into the hallway and ran into the building's security guard. "Your family came by yesterday," he said casually. 3 people, pretty worked up. We told them we couldn't let them upstairs without permission. They didn't like that. Of course they hadn't. For as long as I could remember, my father's opinion of rules had been simple. They applied to other people. That evening, my mother called. I almost let it go to voicemail, then answered. Her voice was shaky. "Your father is beside himself," she said. "Gavin is saying terrible things. They're both blaming you." "They signed the loan," I said. "They missed the payments. The repossession was already in motion before I ever got involved. Blaming me changes nothing." "You did get involved," she said quietly. "The bank says the loan has been sold. They say the new holder is some company tied to you. Is that true?" I could have lied. I could have let her believe it was a rumor. Instead, I chose the version of myself that no longer existed to cushion their experience. "Yes," I said. She inhaled sharply. "Why?" The question was so simple it almost hurt. "Because you didn't invite me to Christmas. Because you only see me when something is broken. Because I am tired of being useful and invisible at the same time." All of those reasons were true, but none would sound valid to her. "Because I'm done being an informal guarantor on debts I never agreed to," I said. "And because I'd rather your obligations sit with someone who will enforce them consistently." "He's your brother," she whispered. "We're your parents." "And I was your daughter when you sent that bill instead of an invitation," I replied. We sat in silence for a few seconds. Then she asked the same question from her text. Are you sure about this? I'm sure I won't pay for his car, I said. Everything else, I'm still figuring out. After we hung up, I stood by my window and watched the snow thicken over the frozen river. There was a line somewhere between protecting myself and punishing them. I wasn't sure which side of it I was standing on anymore. They didn't stay behind screens for long. The next day, our receptionist messaged me. There are 3 people here asking for you. They say they're your family. Do you want me to send them up? I considered telling her to say no, to let security escort them out. But that would have left too many words hanging in the air, too many stories they could shape without my voice. I told her to put them in a small conference room and that I'd be there soon. When I walked in, my father was standing at the head of the table like it belonged to him. His wool coat hung open, snow still melting on the shoulders. Gavin leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, jaw clenched. My mother hovered near the door, clutching her bag. The fluorescent light made all 3 of them look older than the last time I'd seen them together. Maris, my father said, my name sharp in his mouth. We need to talk about what you've done. I closed the door and took a seat across from him. What I've done, I said, is refuse to pay for a car that isn't mine. Don't play dumb, he snapped. The bank sold the loan. The new holder is some outfit you're involved with. They're threatening us with legal action. Wage garnishments? Liens. This is not how family behaves. No, I said, keeping my voice even. Family behaves like inviting everyone to Christmas, not erasing one child from the table and sending her a $30,000 bill instead. What you did isn't how family behaves. What I'm doing is how creditors behave. Because that's what you turned me into. Gavin pushed off the wall. Did you really buy our debt? He demanded. His eyes were bright with anger and something like panic. Did you orchestrate all this just to watch us get screwed? I held his gaze. I acquired a delinquent note that you and Dad signed, I said. You ignored the original lender. You assumed I'd swoop in and fix it. I declined. Now you're dealing with the system you chose to enter. The fact that my company owns the paper doesn't change the underlying reality. You signed a contract you couldn't afford. You always hated me, he threw back. You were always jealous they cared more about me. This is your way of finally getting revenge. Once that accusation would have gutted me. Now it just felt lazy. If I wanted revenge for every time you were prioritized over me, this room would look different, I said. This isn't about who they loved more. It's about who they assumed would carry the weight. My father leaned forward, planting his hands on the table. You will sell that loan, he said. Back to the bank, to another company, I don't care. You will make this go away. You will cover whatever it costs to do that. Then we will move on. The old command tone, unchanged. For years, hearing it had made my stomach drop. Now, in this building where my badge had more power than his last name, the sound landed differently. No, I said. The word felt small and solid on my tongue. He stared at me as if I'd spoken a language he didn't recognize. What did you say? I said no, I repeated. I am not selling the loan. I am not paying it off. You will deal with it like any other borrower, by paying, negotiating, or defaulting. Those choices belong to you. I'm not stepping between you and the consequences. My mother's voice broke in, thin and desperate. Owning the loan yourself? How is that any better than just paying it? She asked. You're putting your own family through collections. If I had quietly wired $30,000 to the bank, nothing would change, I said. Next month, it would be another bill, another crisis, another expectation that I would fix what you refused to face. This way, you at least know exactly who you're dealing with. There are no illusions left about where we stand. I reached into my bag and unfolded a printed article from a business site. The headline announced a new funding round for a cybersecurity company headquartered in Minneapolis. The piece mentioned the company's valuation and, near the end, named a handful of early technical hires. My name was on that list. I slid the article across the table. If you're going to be angry with me, you may as well be angry from an accurate picture, I said. This is the little computer job you dismissed. This is the reason you assume I can erase 5-figure problems without blinking. This is who I've been, while you were too busy talking about Gavin's old knee injury to ask what I was building. My father's eyes scanned the page. He lingered on the valuation number, on the word multi-million, on my title. For the first time, something like uncertainty flickered across his face. My mother's mouth parted in a small O. Gavin snatched the paper, reading quickly, then looked up at me with wide, confused eyes. You never told us, my mother said. You never asked, I replied. My father pushed the article back toward me like he couldn't stand to hold it. So you're successful, he said. That doesn't justify humiliating us. Humiliating, not informing, not confronting. Humiliating. You're not humiliated because you missed payments, I said. You're humiliated because the safety net you assumed was permanent turned out to have teeth. Behind them, through the glass wall, I could see a few co-workers pretending to be busy, while obviously wondering what drama had landed in our conference room. The building's security cameras watched from the ceiling. I leaned back. You taught me to be responsible, I said. I became very good at it. This, I gestured loosely toward the article, the loan, all of it, is me using that skill set on my own behalf. My father straightened. You'll regret this, he said. One day you'll need us. Maybe, I said. If that day comes, I won't send you a payment demand. The conversation ended there, not in reconciliation, not in collapse, just in an exhausted, brittle silence. They left one by one, my mother looking back once with an expression I couldn't read. When the door closed, I exhaled slowly, feeling something in my chest unclench and something else harden. After that meeting, the story moved mostly on paper. My LLC sent formal notices to my parents' address in Portland. They looked like any other creditor letters, balances, deadlines, options. I did not add personal commentary. I simply let the system do what it always did. They didn't lose the house. They didn't end up on the street. My mother's later texts filled in the details. My father drained a retirement account to negotiate a settlement. Gavin sold his electronics and his motorcycle to make a lump sum payment. They complained about the predatory tone of the letters, without acknowledging that they'd been happy enough to sign the original documents. The neighbors still talk about the tow truck, my mother wrote once. Your father says you made us look like trash. To him, reputation mattered more than any private betrayal. It wasn't the loss of the car that cut. It was the fact that other people had watched him lose something he assumed he was entitled to keep. At work, life continued. Breaches happened. Incidents spun up and resolved. My team pushed out reports and recommendations that would never have occurred to my parents to read. I kept my personal life out of meetings. On my commute home, I sometimes replayed that driveway video in my mind, the way my father insisted, my daughter is handling this, as if I were still a child with a chore list instead of the silent owner of his debt. I also replayed the moment I'd said yes to buying the loan. That was the part that stuck under my skin. It would have been one thing to step back and let the bank handle it. It was another to insert myself deliberately into the process, to choose not just distance but control. There was no way to frame that as purely noble. I hadn't just drawn a boundary. I'd weaponized it. Friends' reactions, when I finally told two of them, were split. One said I'd gone too far, that I'd crossed the line from self-protection into vindictiveness. The other said I'd finally done what every burned-out eldest child dreams of, and that my family had gotten off easy. Online, where a friend of a friend later posted a version of the story stripped of names, the comments were even more polarized. Some called me a monster. Others wanted to buy me a drink. Reading it all, I realized the outside world would never agree on what justice looked like here. The only question that mattered was whether I could live with the version of myself who had looked at her family's patterns and decided to mirror the systems she used on strangers at work. A few weeks later, my mother called again. Her tone was different, less frantic, more resigned. "We've paid it," she said. "The car. Your company sent confirmation. It's done." "Good," I said. "That's how it should have been from the start." She hesitated. "Your father says we're finished," she murmured. "That we don't have a daughter anymore." I walked to the window and looked out at the frozen river, lights from the opposite bank shimmering on the ice. "He hasn't really had one for a long time," I said. "He had an employee he didn't pay." There was a pause. Then, very quietly, she said, "I'm ashamed." The words surprised me enough that I didn't respond immediately. "Not just of the car," she went on. "Of that photo. The Christmas one. I look at it now, and all I can see is the space where you should have been. I told myself it would be easier without you there, less tension. Now I see we chose comfort over you." It was the closest thing to real accountability I'd ever heard from her. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe nothing right now. Maybe someday a chance to meet. Just us. Somewhere neutral. To hear who you are now. I won't ask you to forgive us. I don't know if we deserve that. I just don't want the last real conversation we ever had to be about a car." I exhaled slowly. "If I ever want that too," I said, "I'll let you know." It wasn't a promise. It was an opening. After we hung up, I stood there for a long time, watching a single car crawl across a bridge in the distance, its headlights cutting a thin path over the ice. Life didn't magically transform after that. My phone stayed mostly quiet. There were no more group photos from Portland, no more forwarded bills, no new attempts to drag me into contracts they'd signed. The silence felt different, though. It wasn't the old, heavy absence where I still carried their weight. It was a space I'd carved out and defended. One evening in late January, I walked down to the riverbank path. The ice had thickened to a solid sheet. A few brave souls were testing it closer to shore, their boots leaving faint tracks in the snow. The air was so cold my lungs burned. I hugged my coat closer and thought about edges, what they protect, what they cut. There were parts of my story that would always be ugly if I examined them too closely. I had watched a tow truck haul my brother's car away and felt not just relief, but a small, hard flicker of satisfaction. I had used insider knowledge of financial systems to make sure my parents couldn't dodge the consequences. I had made a choice that permanently changed the way they saw me, from useful background character to active threat. None of that fit neatly into the kind, patient, endlessly forgiving protagonist people like to imagine in family dramas, but it fit the truth. Backed into a corner, I had learned to bite. Months later, someone sent me a screenshot from Reddit. An anonymized version of my story had climbed to the top of a revenge forum. The title mirrored the thumbnail you could imagine on a YouTube video. They didn't invite me to Christmas but sent a $30,000 bill for my brother's car. I bought their debt and said, "Repossess it. I'm done being used." They were shocked. The comments were war. People argued about elder daughters, golden sons, trauma, obligation, gender, loyalty. One of the highest voted replies said, "She went too far. She became the villain." Another just below it said, "Good. Families like that only learn when something breaks." I read them all, then closed the app and set my phone aside. Strangers could debate narrative arcs and moral lines all day. They didn't have to live in the aftermath. I did. In mine, there was less noise. No constant edge of crisis feeling every time my phone lit up with a message from Oregon. No expectation that I would step in, fix it, swallow my resentment, and thank them for the opportunity. Just my work, my city, my routines, and a mother who occasionally texted small, neutral updates about the weather, never quite crossing the line into real conversation, but not disappearing entirely either. Sometimes, late at night, I play out an imaginary scene in my head. A knock at my door in Minneapolis. My parents and brother on the threshold. Older and smaller somehow, pride worn down by time. No cameras, no conference room glass, no tow truck in the driveway. Just 3 people who once taught me what love was supposed to look like, asking if it can be rewritten. I don't know what I'll do if that day ever comes. Maybe I'll listen. Maybe I'll close the door. Maybe I'll ask them to sit and lay out, in plain factual language, the full ledger of what we all did to get here. Until then, all I can do is live with the choice I already made. To stop being an unpaid insurance policy on other people's recklessness, even when those people share my last name. People think the hardest part is cutting someone off. It isn't. The hardest part is realizing what you were willing to do when you finally decided